GM, ladies and gents, welcome to Flywheel, your number one source for everything FRAX DeFi and everything in between. If you want to know what's happening in the world on chain, well, you come to the right place. I'm your host, DeFi Dave, here with capital K, and we're here to help you harness the power of the flywheel. And this time, we go over to another part of DeFi, hell, another part of society. Someone who deals a lot of stuff off-chain, someone who deals with a lot of stuff on-chain in the world of governance. In both places, we have on PaperImperium, who's most well known for his contributions to MakerDAO governance, but has since joined GFX Labs and actually does all sorts of things across DeFi, whether it's optimism grants, council, representing, at different DAOs like Uniswap as well. We really got into it on this one. Kit, what are your thoughts?
So I just want to help the readers think about the section, or the listeners think about the section of this pod. It's like, first we talked about his background, then we covered his thoughts and a recap on the Vyper curve situation. And then we lead into MakerDAO, the very deep intricacies of MakerDAO. Then at the end, we zoomed out a bit and talk about Frax as well as what it means across the whole stablecoin ecosystem. So I thought it was a really nice, well-balanced and deep pod.
I think there's a lot that Fraxmalists can learn from Paper's lessons within MakerDAO and MakerDAO's governance and even stablecoin decisions. Definitely pay attention to this one if you want, and make sure if you want to catch us every week with all the alpha, you hit that bell button, go subscribe right now. Let us know what you think in the comments. Love us or hate us. We want to hear it. Leave us a like. Make sure you subscribe to our new website, flywheeldefi.com, brand spanking new. And also make sure you follow us on Twitter at flywheeldefi. Make sure you join our Telegram at flywheeldefi. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFiDave22.
You can follow me at 0xcapital_K.
And let's get the flywheel spinning. Do you hold ETH but don't know what to do with it? Want to earn those juicy liquid staking derivative yields but don't know where to start? Well, FrxETH is there for you. FrxETH is Frax's native LSD solution, allowing you to earn boosted yields in multiple ways on your ETH. If you want to get started, go to app.frax.finance and turn your ETH into FrxETH today. All right, everyone, welcome back to Flywheel. I'm your host, DeFi Dave, here with capital K. And this episode, we reach across the aisle. We go across the chain to our friends and contemporaries at MakerDAO. We have the one, the only, PaperImperium. Paper, should I just call you Paper? P-I? What do you prefer?
Yeah, it's fine. Paper, hey you, whatever.
Paper, thank you so much for coming on. It's great to have you. How's everything going? How's your day going?
A little stressful managing some stuff at the PSM. It's been one of those days where it's been like excitement and then also a pile of paperwork because I'm also on the grants committee optimism. So paperwork and then excitement. So back and forth between dull and pleasantly dull and exciting. So
I mean, I think we can all use a little pleasant dullness after this past week of fun activities. Yeah. But, getting right into it, I've actually, first read about you in CoinDesk in 2021. And Sam, when he was on, Sam Kaz, when he was last on, he recommended you to be a guest specifically. So I've been, really excited for this. I've been following you for the past few years. So it's great to have you on. He's actually called you kind of like the grandfather of DeFi, the dad of DeFi, talking to congressmen, interacting on chain. Like, you really get all different parts of the stack. So before we get into it, What's your background and how did you get started, becoming involved in Maker and in DeFi?
Yeah. So first of all, so nobody gets excited, this isn't going to like dox me or anything. I'm totally doxed. I'm not anon at all. So no personality alpha here. So I was actually originally an archaeologist. I worked in the private sector. So my job was dealing with regulators for helping projects manage the cultural resources permitting process.
Wow.
Mostly energy pipelines, transmission lines, highways, things like that were the main things. I actually came to DeFi because I had bought some Maker tokens because I'm a value investor at heart. I buy grocery stores and cigarette companies. I'm not a Degen, at least I don't think so, and certainly not by crypto standards. And I was attracted to Maker based on the cash flow, particularly at that time. It was really ramping up quickly, and its best days were still ahead of it. So it was a good time to come in. Everything was just so exciting, and I learned what DAOs were. At that point, I didn't know what the hell a DAO was. When I showed up and started, I was like, oh, they have a forum. I kind of lurked for a couple months, and then I made an account and started posting because I had a strong opinion or two about some things. And then lo and behold, like some votes appeared to be swayed by things that I said, and I was hooked from that moment. It's just a fantastic protocol. And I do, even though I was an archaeologist by trade, I do also have a degree in economics and am widely read in financial crises. So just I've become a stablecoin nerd. Maker was my first
come
taste.
To the right place.
Yeah. So yeah, I chat with Sam. We shoot each other messages usually about stablecoin nerd stuff, not like anything exciting necessarily, but like different ways to design stable coins and financial instruments and stuff. I like the boring things like stable coins. I also have through Maker and then other places had a front row seat to pretty much all the real world asset adventures and misadventures. So those are kind of the two areas I focus on. And then professionally, I work for GFX Labs, which it mostly is a dev code that builds things, but most people know it for its governance work, which I head up our governance section. So places like MakerDAO, Optimism, and Uniswap are like real bastions of strength and influence. And then we're also present on 0x and Arbitrum. And historically, we also used to vote on Hop and Compound as well.
Yeah, I just want to say kudos to your diverse background in archaeology. I think we should have more people with backgrounds other than your standard like technical background or finance background, because I think all of it has something to add to what we're building here in the future. And I'm just curious, are there ways that people wouldn't expect archaeology and your past work kind of affect and influence your work in DeFi?
So my wife always asks me when she introduces me at parties, she's like, tell people what you do. And usually if I just don't want to answer, I'm like, oh, I'm a hairdresser. This was what I used to say when I was an archaeologist, because it was another industry where people then will pepper you with questions. So if you're tired, but you just lie. But I always describe what I do as governance and governments. So that's keeping my employer and protocols that we participate on abreast of policy changes in the public policy and government affairs space, and some other kind of informal, not necessarily consulting, but advisory work in the policy space. So I guess the third leg of my stool is policy nerd. So how does that relate to archaeology? Well, I was in the private sector. I was not like a professor most of the time. I was helping people navigate the regulatory environment, which is very applicable to crypto.
Yeah.
Because regulators are regulators. They're the same everywhere. It's a certain type of person that's attracted to the position. They like the rule followers. They are risk averse. They like to check a box. They generally, the United States, I'll actually say, is actually really blessed with generally honest bureaucrats and regulators. I'm not going to say they necessarily have the best interest of everybody at heart, but they're honest and they generally try to adhere to there are some big notable exceptions that I'm sure we can all name, but they mostly operate in good faith. And if you these are people, and I am used to talking to people like that. So those skills really translated very well and paid big dividends coming over to crypto, because I was shocked at how few people really knew how to talk to a lawmaker or a regulator.
It's people in politics all the way down, whether it's on-chain or off-chain, regulator or degen. We're all just people.
It's funny. I always say it's T-bills all the way down, because at the bottom, there's a few things. Everything's on the top of those.
Yeah. Speaking of, Kit, do you have something?
Quick question, Paper. So you went from talking to these lawmans and lawwomen, and how did that translate over to the on-chain degen on the forums? Like, I'd love to hear how that transition went for you. Were you kind of shocked by their language, or just how open everything is?
No. So, I mean, archaeologists are rough and tumble sort, known to drink dry mini at a hotel bar, and well, we don't have time for it, but there's a lot of field stories as well that I guess could be called degenerate, just not financially so. So actually, I guess the way I got involved in governance, because there was no such thing as delegation yet at Maker, and I'm obviously not a 100 millionaire or whatever it takes to sling around a stack of votes. So actually, the way my first contributions over at Maker, beyond just being a gadfly in the forum around some budget issues, was I did a speaker series where I was trying to connect people from traditional finance and people and decentralized finance. So the first speaker I brought to do a friendly Q&A where they could they could talk to the Maker community, Maker DAO community members could ask them questions. So we're like a senior vice president from the St. Louis Fed, a Duke business school professor who had just written a book. Actually, co-authored it with Joey Santoro. That was back when Faye was new. I brought
Campbell Harvey, right?
Yes, Campbell Harvey. That was a really good talk too. I should go find that and post it somewhere.
And didn't the St. Louis Fed write a report on DeFi?
So the Fed actually is they've written lots of reports on DeFi. So it's very possible. And then I think there was also a Congress critter that we brought too as well. It was just the first time that a federally elected official of the U.S. had ever sat down with a DAO to talk about anything, which was kind of cool. So I guess that's one way that it kind of connected the two. Was these people were mutually curious about each other, people in decentralized finance and people in power.
So did you just create a Telegram group and everybody just hopped in, or
I went on Crowdcast or wherever and just I asked them if they would do it. They're like, sure, and it went from there, and then Maker had its delegation program began, and I kind of occupied my time from there.
Yeah. Now let's move from the people to the chain, especially with recent events that transpired this week over with our friends at Curve. It was an incredible fiasco between the Vyper hack and then it threatened the CRV token, which leads to my next question about Fraxlend, because you correctly predicted that Fraxlend would be paid back first on July 31st. How did you come up with that conclusion? And what are your final takeaways from this whole Vyper Curve situation that went down?
So I'll start by saying I don't have final takeaways yet because it's not resolved. It's still playing out. At least
how's it still playing? How's it still playing out?
Right. So he still has large loans outstanding. That the Curve founder still has large loans outstanding between three different venues, primarily. Being Abracadabra, Fraxlend, and of course Aave V2. So Fraxlend by its design is, I think, I've come to the conclusion it's probably more conservative. Whether or not that makes it more appealing to borrowers, I think it makes it more appealing to lenders and operators, just because of the way that the utilization, the rate is not just a line, like the line is dynamic, and it's also more isolated. So I think that encouraged. I think that's an interesting design. I was really excited to watch it play out in like its first stress test. And I think it did really well because it was not straight up parabolic interest rates just because you hit 100%, 99.8 or whatever I saw once on the utilization, and instantly lick someone. I mean, 10,000% interest will lick anybody, right? It doesn't take long. But at the same time, it punished people for staying long out on the utilization curve for a long time, right? So it kind of, from a borrower perspective, they're a little bit insulated from gyrations in like a large lender, withdrawing, or a large borrower coming in to crowd their position in the market. But at the same time, it's still like increasingly, it was an increasing amount of pressure. So I think it was highly predictable once you looked at it that that Frax was going to get paid back first, or at least managed first, and it was. And so now things have settled down, but the situation is still not resolved. So I don't know if you saw over there the proposal at Abracadabra to basically jack up the rates
mid loan.
Right.
Imagine you take out a loan and then someone's like, we're just going to jack up your rates. Sorry about that.
And of course, Sifu is actually one of the liquidity providers that's propping up the curve market on Fraxlend. So I think maybe this is ascribing too much credit, and I always view it as an adversarial environment. But now I think Sifu saw that Fraxlend was effectively higher in the seniority ladder, right? Because of these venues, who was going to get paid back first or get to liquidate first in lieu of payment, and thus get first bite of the apple. And now they're trying to manage their position so that they're ahead now that the immediate danger is past, and telegraphing it far in advance. So, coming in to prop up the Frax market so that, which he's not like most of it, but he's like 3.5% or something last I looked. Enough that it matters, so that lowers the urgency to pay back on Fraxlend while raising the urgency on the venue that he's from. I think that looks to me like he's trying to strategically unwind because he wants to manage down the risk position over there. And then Aave is really looking. I got to say, Aave's really looking like a bag holder here. If things go sideways, which it's not destined to. But I feel like they, I think I said on Twitter today, I think they are still digging the hole instead of filling it in. Like, I don't really agree with what they're doing over at Abracadabra with the punitive rates, but like they're trying to fill in the hole as opposed to dig it deeper.
Abracadabra or Aave?
So at Abracadabra, they're trying to manage their risk position. Over at Aave, there's like floating a proposal to buy 2 million USDTs worth of A curve from him, right? Like, I don't see, like, I question the need to extend their exposure to curve, right? And that's also money that if things do go badly, that's money that would go further to cover bad debt after a market collapse, because it wouldn't be like a black hole. It'd be like $10 million probably, something like. So 2 million is like quite a bit of that. And at the same time, they don't, maybe I'm just not following closely enough, but they don't appear to be doing anything about their V3. Like, there's open capacity to borrow against curve there, and it's still at like liquidation value there is like 61%. So like, not particularly conservative. It's more conservative than over at V2. But like, if you're trying, it just seems to me that if you're trying to slowly ratchet down the huge position you allowed to develop over at V2, you should, number one, not be buying curve, right? To increase your exposure, or in this case, A curve. And two, you should probably simultaneously close off the V3 because, the aggregate, it's the same governance that's on the hook to backstop this stuff. So,
right. Same DAO.
Right, it's the same DAO, and if there's a cascade at 2, there's going to be one at 3 and everywhere else. So, Yeah. So I think so. I don't have final thoughts yet, I guess was where I started this line of conversation because it's still developing.
It's like a game of musical chairs. And it's like you want to be first to the chair, and whoever's, out of the circle is left holding the bag.
Yeah.
Potentially.
I also saw that Aave is increasing the slash from 30% up to 60% for all the stake Aave people. So that was also interesting too, is how they're prepared to take on this bag holding of CRV if they need to.
So I have long been, and this is not a knock on like Aave or anybody over there, but just governance is ultimately people, right? And people are the same everywhere. I think it's not an ideal design to have like this. I mean, I think, let's be real, they're never going to vote to slash themselves, right? I mean, in what world is someone with a bunch of staked Aave going to vote to slash themselves?
A fantasy one.
Yeah, yes, I think that's unfortunate. I think it's just not a good design. It creates perverse incentives, and so I don't think that will ever happen. So I think that maximum amount they can slash in one go, I think, doesn't matter.
So what would you consider us completely out of the word, or Michael completely out of the woods in this situation? Like all his debt's paid down. What do you consider that?
I mean, he doesn't have the money to pay it all off, right? So I don't know. I don't give financial advice. I think if I were in the same, I think he's doing what he probably can. That said, I mean, he's a forced seller. People know it. Even if he thinks that he's, I think if I were him, I would try to, and maybe he does this because we're not privy to them. I think I would probably try to find someone and say, I need cash today. I'm going to sell this to you at less than it's worth. We both recognize it's less than it's worth. So I also want a call option to buy it back at 20% higher than what you're selling it for in 1 year or something like that. Right. And, if I didn't come back and buy it in a year at a higher price, then I was clearly wrong. But I think I would try to find some way to structure a deal like that, I think, but he may have very limited choices and counterparties. I don't know.
I have to turn an alarm off, so 1 second.
Yeah, so I definitely think Paper, we saw that, right, with all the OTC deals that he tried to make just so that he can cause this to happen. It was at 40 cents, so it was like markedly below market, at least at this point. And what I'm curious to hear from you is, do you think that this issue ballooned into the problem it is today because the protocol and also Mich was pretty cavalier with the CRV stack and just taking loans everywhere left and right? Because the Vyper hack was bad, but it didn't really, hit the protocol itself. It was actually the founder's position that has nothing to do with how the protocol worked, threatened the protocol.
Right. This is not I think we should all be very clear. This is not an existential threat to Curve. I mean, I get that Curve emissions are have historically been a key part of what gets people there, but like Curve's competitive advantage is that it's a DEX that's designed for stable coins specifically. I think they're big enough now that I think they would find ways to find. I think especially since a lot of stablecoin partners, the ones that have survived being beat up the last year or so, a lot of the smaller ones and medium-sized ones, I think they're hungry, and there's some new ones launching. Like we just saw, what was it, FD USD, which I've not diligenced or know not much about, but there are some new players entering the space. We've had, I think people recognize the value of having liquidity on Curve, and I think also some of the more regulated entities are maybe less scared of DeFi than they used to be. So I think we'll just have to see, but I think Curve, the protocol, will be fine. So then the question is, was someone negligent? This is like rearview mirror stuff. So in hindsight, was it risky for him to accumulate such a large debt position? I mean, yes, but who would have thought, like Vyper hack would have been, Vyper exploit would have been the thing that gets you. That's not what I would have thought. I would have thought somebody.
I don't think anybody would have thought that.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So, I've actually been impressed at his willingness to defend the position, to be quite honest. Because he's got his money, he's got his house, got his life. So the fact that he's willing to go to such lengths to try to save not just his position. I mean, maybe he's just trying to save his position, but not like wreck all of the people he works with that have curve and stuff like that. I think I have to give some measure of respect there, regardless of whether he should have gotten in this position in the first place.
And I was actually on a stream today, a show today with our friend CurveCap, and he was mentioning how Michael has been using lending protocols since 2018 and has never been liquidated, not even once. And he mentioned and he mentioned how Curve arose because of a need to have a stable swap in order to swap between, different lending positions and being able to pay back different lending positions. And then, eventually CRV USD came about in order to create a softer liquidation mechanic. So all of this, everything that he's built has been built from necessity in a way. And I think he does have definitely a lot of pride for sure. He's like, I've never been liquidated. And he might just be like toying with people, like waiting to announce these OTC deals to like bait short sellers. Who knows? Maybe I don't know. But, maybe he's just having fun. He's never been liquidated, and maybe he has everything under control, and we just don't realize it.
I doubt he's having fun. It's possible. I think the probably somewhere where I feel marginally more qualified to opine is whether or not this risk was managed well at Aave. And because I think it's really the standout. I mean, there's large positions at other protocols, but like it's just an enormous position over there. And I think particularly since this has been a well-known issue for a long time.
Yep.
Like
with the mango, right?
Yeah, I kind of wonder if they had access to risk professionals like Block Analytica or someone like that, if they would have done a better job. Quite frank. Maybe governance wouldn't have listened to them, but I think it's clear that I don't know that it's clear that they're risk management professionals over there, which they've got two sets, right? They've got Gauntlet and Chaos, right?
Yep.
I don't want to say it's necessarily clear that they didn't know what they were doing, but they clearly did. If they did not have the conviction to really stand up and be like, look, you pay us to help you not get wrecked. Let's not get wrecked. Right?
And
Gauntlet did.
Yeah, didn't Gauntlet like a month and a half ago try to put forth a proposal to be like, hey guys, this position here.
Didn't they withdraw it though before it went to a vote?
I'm not sure exactly.
I think they did.
I don't think it went to a vote. I think the community was, naturally against it. So no matter what they said, the community has to vote at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I mean, but if your job is to say this is an existential threat, or not even necessarily an existential, but this is you're going to get wrecked, like this is going to hurt, then you should see that. And, this is a major problem at all protocols, right? The Aave is not unique like this. All the large protocols, they run on risk more than we like to admit. Sometimes that's a calculated risk and the trade-offs are worth it. But there's an awful lot of I don't see the risk, head in the sand. And I think it's unfortunate, but I do think that's a problem across most of DeFi, and we're all imperfect. And so it's mostly a matter of, I would say, how can Aave should be thinking, number one, about how to manage this down and not dig the hole deeper, as I said, and also think about how can we avoid this situation in the future? Like what can we do that hopefully automatically, so it doesn't have to go to a governance vote where people are like, no, we don't want to do anything about the curve thing. Hopefully they can come up with some ideas of how to prevent this from occurring in the future. And that'll be, you learn lessons. That's how it goes.
What would you suggest to prevent this from happening in the future if you were at Aave?
I mean, I feel like I'm not familiar enough with like all the real details of how their protocol works, because a lot of times it's the real small details that only like 20 people know that can like make or break a really great idea. It's my experience at Maker and a few other protocols is that it's the really tiny stuff that like that institutional knowledge that like maybe 24 people know. And then, you know, you can set something up and be like, well, we know there's a blind spot here. We're just gonna have to watch it because we know there's some small edge case where we get wrecked. But then eventually those people move on, but nobody then knows to keep watching the thing, right? I mean, we saw this happen we saw this happen in Maker. I had a vault get like, I think inadvertently exploited, right, for one of the small real world assets. And it was all because of a very small, like technical edge case thing. And it cost like $200,000 as a result. So, you know, it was an integration with a real world asset. And the platform with the real world asset was not designed with Maker in mind, and then Maker, you know, they integrated with each other, and there was just like a real edge case in that. So that's the kind of lesson that's taught me I don't want to give like a specific prescription to Aave because they probably know their protocol better than I do. Yeah.
I feel like didn't this like with what was his name? Was it Avi or something that tried
Avi
this
Feldman.
with CRV? No. I don't think it's Avi Feldman. It was like another Avi that tried this with something. I forgot.
Are you talking about the guy that tweeted, "What are you going to do? Arrest me"?
I think the guy who executed a profitable trading strategy.
Eisenberg.
He did the same thing with CRV, right? Like earlier this year.
He tried because like the Fraxlend rates were up.
So I feel like
it was Ox or Ox. Like I don't say that publicly about people very often, but like I'm going to commit a crime and document it on Twitter in real. And to say nothing of just like letting people know you're doing this strategy that then maybe people could counter trade you. Oh, what he was thinking. I think the answer is he wasn't.
Now, moving on. Keit, did you have any other questions?
No. But let me catch this next one. I think I know where you're gonna go. But speaking of like the lending markets, as we have been, like you recently stated that you aren't convinced that Spark is any better than the D3M model. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, I don't know. This week kind of says that maybe it is because Maker government.
Maybe it is.
So maybe it is. Yeah, I mean, I'm ambivalent about Spark. I mean, it's still in like the wait and see mode. Like,
I wasn't like wait and see.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but I also think it's one of the few remaining levers to perhaps squeeze some more growth out of Maker. So in its current iteration, I think there's lots of ways Maker could grow, but I think under its current management, I think this is one of the few ways that it potentially can. So the trouble is like it's an Aave fork, right? But like it doesn't really have a competitive advantage other than the fact that Maker just yeets a bunch of money into it. But Maker could do that on Aave or Compound and has in the past. And I think to their credit, or rather, the Spark folks have really had to do it with one arm behind their back as well, because governance has imposed arbitrary limitations on like they can't list like wrapped Bitcoin, too centralized, can't list it. And having to like turn off like one of their markets, because the DAI savings rate's about to go up to 8%. Like, so to avoid like weird things, they have to. So I think they've had to like really like fight for every inch. So I think to their credit, but at the same time, like I read this all the time in comments on grants proposals over at Optimism. Like, we don't want to measure team effort; we want to measure results, right? And as my dad always used to say, he was not a wise man, but he had a lot of wise words every once in a while that would really get me. And one of them was always be that, a good excuse is still an excuse. So, yes, I'm still in wait and see mode on Spark. It was not obvious. It's not obvious to me that it's better than just D3Ming into other protocols. That being said, no exposure to Aave because not D3Ming into Aave. So maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I always reserve the right to be wrong.
You mentioned growth strategies for Maker. What are some creative growth strategies that you have in mind that you would like to see implemented?
So over the last year or so, I've firmly come to believe the future is multi-chain. Like whether that's layer 2s or side chains or alt L1s, like I personally think it's probably mostly L2s, but whatever, it could be some combination. But I think it's just so important to like be multi-chain and be everywhere, be anywhere that your customers are, particularly since like if you think about Maker, like it's early days. Like I was listening to someone from Oasis, now SummerFi. I didn't catch all of it, but I got to hear part of his presentation to some folks today. And he was pointing out that like early on, DAI like solved real problems for people, right? Like it was dollars for people that didn't have access to dollars, right? But transaction costs went up. That became not really, the people in Argentina or, Zimbabwe or, wherever kind of got pushed out by the transaction costs. And, but when you go to like Arbitrum or Optimism and start, screwing around with stuff just to learn how things work, which is one of my favorite parts of the job, is just like take $20 and like just mess with stuff. It's like you spend an hour kind of doing all kinds of crazy contortions with protocols, and you're like, I spent $3. Like I did like 120 transactions. It's the $3. That's powerful stuff. And I also think that, we'll see if the idea of app chains really takes off, but I just think there's so much runway and so much promise. And Maker had a multi-chain strategy, the Maker teleport. It's been turned off. The code is collecting dust on GitHub.
Oh no.
Yeah. So
it's such a cool name though.
Yeah. It was originally like Maker Wormhole, but then they were like, oh yeah, there's a bridge called Wormhole. So they made it teleport. I don't know how to get Maker back to pursuing a multi-chain strategy. The trouble is that the co-founder's not keen on it, and that's the ball game. And the devs that were working on it don't work there anymore. So
the politics.
Yeah.
How do you traverse Maker governance? And you've been doing it for years.
No one really traverses. You just get stuck.
You get stuck, and you keep going. You persevere.
Well, you don't cross the wastes. You get stuck in it, and that's just like waiting for the vultures.
Speaking of growth strategies, the DSR is eminently increasing to 8%. Exciting stuff. What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on the Endgame proposal? And in it, it's like, let's create a new stablecoin, a new governance token, and a new chain.
So I think the DSR thing will be an expensive experiment. I think I'm very skeptical. That said, it's like designed to ratchet down as utilization goes up. So like It's not gonna like spend more than Maker is projected to make. Though a lot of those revenues are off chain, and it remains to be seen how quickly they can be realized. So the paper profits, but presumably the money's there. So I don't think it's like a dangerous experiment to run. I think it might be expensive. I think the prediction is just that some fund that has a bunch of idle ETH is just going to plug it into a vault, borrow it, what is it, like 3.5% or something, and then put that right in, get a carry trade and until utilization drops. I think is the predictable outcome. But if there's one thing about DeFi, it's telling me that markets are not efficient. So maybe we'll see something interesting and wonderful. I don't know. I'm skeptical. As far as the other portions, like a new coin, a new stable coin, a new gov token, I think it's stupid. I think I don't know what else to say. Like, you don't like the name, so but the contract for the DAI token is immutable, so you can't change the name. Like, so we're going to spend millions of dollars on to rebrand it. But you got a new token contract. Like, you break every integration. I mean, DAI will still exist, but like the idea is that it will be left behind and you can migrate your DAI to the new one and back and forth. But like, you're going to have to go around to every place that takes DAI now and be like, please take new stable. We call it new stable because there's not a name yet. So new stable, please take new stable. And they're going to say, and they're either going to say, no, it's a lot of work, or they're going to say, we've already got DAI. Why do we need this? If they're fungible, why do we need two? Fragment the liquidity. Why would we do that to ourselves?
Yeah. Like, DAI has developed this Lindy over the years, people, three pool.
Yeah. So like, yeah, there's not going to be any three pool for this thing. I mean, I don't know, maybe somebody will make it, but it's not going to be third of $1 billion in it, or however much is in three pool at any given time. So I don't understand the need for it. And I certainly think it's underestimated what what it will do to, I think from an integration standpoint, it's just, you got to go back and do stuff you already did.
Right. So how about the MetaDAO tokens? What do you think about those?
I'll admit this stuff gets updated constantly, like every month. So I will admit I have not paid a lot of attention to any recent changes to, but I think just conceptually, I wonder a lot about MetaDAOs. I think early on, I think a lot of Endgame has a lot of stuff in it. Like a lot of it's really good. There's a few things that are good. It's huge, right? There's going to be some stuff everybody likes. I think if you go back in time 2 years or whenever Rune first started talking about this, I think conceptually, like the problems he identified, he was not generally wrong about some of them, complexity and perverse incentives and some of these things that he set out to solve. He wasn't wrong, right? So I think there was a lot to like early on. Like back then, I think they were MetaDAOs, then SubDAOs, then MetaDAO. I forget which one it is now, but it goes back and forth. The names keep changing. So these SubDAOs, I'm going to call them SubDAOs because it's easier for me to say, roll off the tongue. I think there was a lot to like by taking all like business activities and putting those out at arm's length, so that any, especially potentially regulated activities, and then have Maker Core be like the software, right? People working on the software, the protocol, and then all the business stuff is out here to these qualified intermediaries, or however you want, SubDAOs, these SubDAOs. So I think there was a lot to like about that. But these things get tweaked over and over and over again, and I wonder now. So we don't know because it hasn't happened yet. There are no SubDAOs, or MetaDAOs or whatever. They don't exist yet. There's no tokens yet, but people are expected to farm these tokens that'll be the governance tokens for these SubDAOs. And I think I just question who is going to want to do it, because it's not clear to me that Maker will relinquish enough control to make these attractive. Like, why would you want to go build a business on top of Maker, which, to be quite frank, has a bit of a history of like kind of rugging its contributors? If Maker can still control your treasury or something like that, or you have to ask for permission, like you're like signing up to be a vassal, right? A
vassal state,
right? Yeah, you kowtow to the king, and King Maker says, yes, Spark Protocol or whatever other ones emerge. You can do this, that, and the other, but you can't do this, that, and the other because, whatever. And you need to remit to me a certain percentage of your earnings. And I will tell you how much you get to keep. And I can change and most importantly, I can change the terms of the deal later. So I think that's a problem. I don't think it's unsolvable, but I think that's an open question. And then from an operational standpoint, who's going to want to run these things? So, Spark, I think by being first out of the gate has kind of snapped up some of the technical talent that was available, ex-Maker people for the most part. But I mean, you got to remember when Endgame passed, like most of the devs quit, right? All the old delegates were offboarded, and all of the governance staff has either quit or given notice. So, like, if the idea was to staff these SubDAOs with people, at least at the beginning, with people from Maker, there's a lot fewer people at Maker. And the ones that are there are brand new and don't know how things work. I mean, that's not their fault. It's a complex beast. It takes a long time to find all the nooks and crannies. But so then you've got a recruitment problem too. See, it's not just who's going to want the token, who's going to do the work, right? Because you can't have passive token holders instructing a workforce that doesn't exist. I think there's a question.
What makes you stay around? What motivates you? What is your why?
Well, I mean, I'm a salaried employee at GFX. My job is, and I don't spend all my time at Maker.
Okay.
I also do work at, I do work at Optimism and I also, handle our governance affairs, 0x and Arbitrum, though those are much more limited. And then I'm also responsible for monitoring other relevant counterparties and generally staying informed in the space.
So it's not like all eggs in one basket with Maker. I still have the CoinDesk article just like in my head.
Yeah. So that was before GFX hired me. I went in-house with them shortly thereafter, a few months later.
Oh, okay. So you're kind of spread across all of DeFi.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, I was just listening to a pod with Getty Hill, I think one of the founders of GFX, and then he was saying how you guys are, I mean, his bread and butter, as he said, was lending protocols. Like he just loves it, and that's kind of what he's on. And he's also a self-proclaimed Uniswap maxi.
Yeah.
Do you have those same kind of thinking? Yeah. Do you have those kind of
actually just launched a new front end for like a trading level, professional trading front end for Uniswap
V3, right?
Yeah. You can still swap a V2 on there. It just doesn't have like all the bells and whistles and stuff.
Imagine having a Uniswap maxi on here. That'd be interesting.
Yes.
I mean, Paper, do you also subscribe to the thinking of the founder, or in terms of like Uniswap maximalism?
I mean, I'm personally agnostic. I route things through aggregators.
My man.
Well, people ask me like, what do you like? What kind of, yield farming or strategies are you doing? I'll be honest. I don't do a lot of like, I play with stuff a lot, but if for people that know which are my wallets, like they don't have a lot in them, and they just. I fiddle with things because I like to learn by doing, right? That's how you find out how things work. But I'm not like moving around my net worth on chains. So I actually don't do that many. I do maybe a couple transactions a week most of the time, unless you count just like, there's some new thing. Figure out, spend 5 hours to figure out how it works.
Wow, I just figured because you're so deep in the governance, and that's kind of where all the alpha comes from. So I would imagine you're like a on-chain sleuth and be able to just like, you read something here in the forums and you execute it on-chain.
Part of what I am known for is knowing who has what and how much of it. But you'd be surprised. I mean, that's not necessarily information that I'm in a position to act on, right? And also, I can't really act on non-public information if it's not stuff that I just is out in the open. But also, as I said earlier on, I buy grocery stores and cigarette companies. I don't do the
crazy value investor.
Yes, I don't do the like crazy recursive, 100x leverage on Pepe or Bold.
Yeah. Yeah, let's take a step back into the Endgame proposal, or rather the Endgame plan. I know I read on CoinDesk that there's like almost 1.2 billion in T-bills so far under the treasury. Is that right?
So let me check real quick. So I think there's, let's see, 750 million in ish. Maybe I think it's a little less than that. 640 million or something like that in the Clydesdale vault. and then 600 million in the Andromeda vault. And then there's also 500 million of T-bill ETFs that are in the Clydesdale vault. And then if you really want to count it, like there's lots of things that are derivatives of T-bills, like all the regulated stablecoins are basically just T-bills. Idle funds and real world asset trusts are generally held as bank deposits or T-bills while they wait to be deployed. So there's potentially much more than that. But yes, there's I think 1.2 is probably about accurate in like just pure T-bills.
Got it. And then like how, like I guess these vaults are spun up, but who actually takes custody of the T-bills, and how does Maker have any real world repercussions in case, you know, they decide to rug Maker?
So I mean, I can talk about this as long as you want, and it'll bore your for a small subset of your listeners, they'll love it. Well, because it's where all the skeletons are. And
we love it. We love the deep cuts. Give it to us.
But the short answer is every one of these real world assets is structured slightly differently for the most part. So you'd have to point to one and say, how is this structured? I know how they're all structured and know who has the ability to do what for all of them, but there's no, I can't paint with a broad awful answer. Yeah.
Okay. Well then, let's pick the largest one. Was it the Andromeda or
Clydesdale would be the largest.
Clydesdale, yes. So how does that vault structure look like? Yeah, please. I'd love to learn more.
Okay, so let me try to be objective in all of how I present everything. So Clydesdale is actually a vault shared by two entities, James Asset Trust 1 and James Asset Trust 2. James Asset Trust 1 came first, which is why the vault was created. So that one is $500 million for treasury-backed ETFs. So, I mean, it's actually really fascinating the way it's put together. I don't know. I think there were some lessons learned that maybe could be applied in the future and maybe should have been applied since then. But you have a trust, a maker contributes to the trust. And so you have a broker that swaps the DAI for stable coins that can be redeemed. You redeem those stable coins, typically USDC. So then you have fiat. That fiat's added to is contributed to the trust. If it's written well, the trust in theory is very, very constrained and in theory controlled by maker governance. These things are not battle tested, so we will never know until they are. In that particular case, it then banks through Switzerland and then buys a ETF in Ireland. So you're hopping across a lot of jurisdictions. So you are holding a lot of jurisdiction risk potentially. Good jurisdictions, but you don't know what you don't know, like we learned with the Vyper thing.
Nonetheless.
And there's, you also get some, there were some unintended bumps along the way. Like there's a tax in Switzerland that I think was not anticipated, which 30 basis points to move the money through there, which is like a lot on $500 million. Yeah. Not a great error, but whatever. And then the Clydesdale vault was then expanded to include James Asset Trust 2, which was to buy $750 million worth of T-bills. I think 60 some million were returned already, and then some interest as well. So those are the two. It's the only vault only permission vault that has two entities in it, but they have the same trustee. The two trusts have the same trustee, and the trustee shares information with a reporting agent. The reporting agent is charged with making monthly reports to the forum.
Got it.
Wow.
And so if Maker wants to liquidate or bring back funds for those two trusts, it has to pass a governance proposal instructing the trustee to do so. And the reporting agent then tells the trustee, look at this thing that just got passed.
So in the future, do you see Maker increasing its T-bill exposure? Will it create a trust number 3?
There is a trust number 3. So James Asset Trust number 3 is the Coinbase custody. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
His custody one. So these three are all share. They're all part of the same group. They all share the same trustee. Two of them share the same vault. Not really a fan of that structure. It makes it very hard for accounting purposes to like quickly divide how much is from the ETFs, how much is from the T-bills. The reporting has also not been as the reporting hopefully will be improved going forward as well. Yeah, we got our first. Those are the only three that are part of that family. Like Andromeda is run by a completely different setup, where you have like a real world, like a foundation controlled by Maker that serves the counterparty to an actual borrower rather than contributing to a trust. And then so there's, as you see, there's a lot of different ways to do it. I'm not really a fan of trust contributions. I'd rather have a borrower. That being said, it's unclear to what extent Maker can pursue creditor rights in the event that it needs to do so, and it probably varies.
I wonder what that looks like, a DAO pursuing creditor rights.
Yeah.
Yet to be manifested.
Someone, right? I mean, there's why can't it? You know, people are under this pressure that an unincorporated entity, that a unincorporated association is not an entity. That's not
but
usually
whose name is going to be on the plaintiff. Like,
I mean, there's
suing.
Maker is facing litigation in a patent troll case right now. MakerDAO is the defendant.
MakerDAO has an off-chain entity?
No.
It's just the defendant.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I mean, just because you don't register an entity doesn't mean you don't have an entity. I mean, it's like and you can own property, stuff like that. You just can't pass KYC, right? You can't get a bank account, right? Because it's not that you. So the question is, when do you cross the line from being a group of people all with divergent interests to being an unincorporated entity of some kind, which is open to whatever the local jurisdictions are? And it's not even clear to me what jurisdiction Maker would be in. I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to pretend to be one. Right. So, but if you hold yourself out to be a business, you're going to be treated like one, right? So, but think to like little league teams and book clubs and stuff. They can have even some churches that are more informally organized. I mean, the American Bar Association, until for a very long time, most of its history was an unincorporated association, right? You don't necessarily have to have a registered legal entity to own property. You can. It makes it difficult to interact with modern financial structures because of modern laws. But your lacrosse team.
It's like a measure of what's socially acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, your lacrosse team can own a piece of land or something like. I mean, it's not that these things don't exist and can't own property, and it's a matter that's hard to interact, right, with a lawyer who's the client, right? Because if that's not defined, like your attorney-client privilege, which is one of the most important things, is really hard to work. A lawyer's probably not going to take you if you can't define your membership and beneficial ownership. How are you going to get a bank account? So again, it's just a matter of interacting with these things, not that you can't do it in principle.
Wow. Okay.
So Maker could sue somebody in theory. It's, I guess, where I'm going with this.
Maker can have, they might not be able to pass KYC, but they exist on chain. It's great with keys. They don't care if you're an entity, like what type of entity you are. You can just like go and interact, and that's like the beauty of being on chain. I was going to ask about. I wanted to move on. Kid, do you have any other questions?
No, that was good. That was good.
You said you talked to Sam a lot. I want to get your thoughts on Stablecoin Maximalism, the idea he presented back in Denver in March. I presented it in Paris a few weeks ago. And I think it's really poignant, especially considering how much Maker has increased their T-bill exposure, Tether being number one, having as many treasuries as nation states. You're really seeing Stablecoin Maximalism play out. And so what's your opinion on it? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? What are your thoughts?
I'll confess I don't go to conferences, so I haven't heard the presentation.
You haven't heard this.
Yeah.
The jux of the position, Kit, you probably heard me say this so many times already, but we're going to go again. On a long enough time scale, most DeFi protocols will have a stablecoin or have a stablecoin at the focal point of its existence. You see this with like Aave Go, Serv USD with Curve. And at scale, these stablecoins will look universally the same in structure. And with that universal structure, what it looks like, it's twofold. You have the high quality reserve asset that's earning on the risk-free rate and the swap facility. So for the US dollar, the high quality reserve asset is T-bills. The swap facility is cash for dollar peg stablecoins. For ETH peg stablecoins, the risk-free rate is the beacon chain yield. For Frax, the swap facility right now is the curve pool. For STETH, it's the redemption contract. And now, if you take this even further, with the DSR rate increasing, becoming the risk-free rate of DAI, and not only just DAI but of DeFi, you have a lot of money from bridges, being pulled off bridges into the DSR. And so something that the guys at Gnosis chain proposed is to take the DAI in their bridge, the XDAI bridge, and put it into the DSR and actually copy the FRAXETH model and have SX DAI, and that's earning the risk-free rate of DAI.
I think, okay. I think, I've heard him talk about this before. So I think I don't necessarily agree with the first part. I think I mostly agree with the second part, that the models will converge. I mean, you see this, right? Look at Maker now. It's like if you took Tether and old school Maker and they had a baby, right? Half of it's off chain, right? And it's off chain, and not necessarily clear in real time where everything is, but we trust that it's there, and that's enough for now. But at the same time, you see places like Gemini or Paxos that you can they'll Circle, they'll publish even the QSIPs, right? They're moving towards increasing transparency and more on-chain activity, not just trading around on their exchanges. And then you see the DeFi native ones that are edging towards the T-bills and the off-chain component. They're kind of all moving closer to the center of the spectrum. They haven't met yet. So I do think I think I would cautiously support the second thesis. I think that's probably
cautiously
good.
Support the second cautiously, but the first one you don't necessarily.
I don't. Yeah, I don't want to say that it's. I think that's untrue. I think there are certain conditions that would lead to that, and certain that wouldn't. Out in traditional finance, we basically have if I bank at Wells Fargo, I have Wells Fargo coins, right? Bank at Bank of America coins. If I, bank at my local credit union, my local credit union coins. They're not. We call them cash equivalents because they have the financial infrastructure of the United States has advanced to the point that everyone is willing to take everyone else's with a banking licenses, the liabilities at face value. At the retail level, we all have, we feel comfortable putting our money in because we have deposit insurance up to, a meaningful amount for most people. But it's not there for most of the deposits at some of these banks, as we've recently been reminded. People kind of take for granted that these are that a Silicon Valley Bank coin is just as good as an
algo stable gone right.
So I think, but that's all meshed together through regulation and prudential oversight. So, which, say what you will about it, it means that people are willing to take all these they can all they're composable with each other because they're inside the walled garden. I don't think there's anything like that on the horizon for stable coins. And, if you go back in time in the US, to the 1800s and 1700s, banks, they issued their own paper. And, I'm an archaeologist, so I love history. And, bartenders, saloon masters and stuff would have these big books that would have list every bank in America. They get a new one every year. And it would help them and it would have suggested rates to discount them based on creditworthiness and distance, because you can't redeem for $1 worth of gold. A bank that's in Boston, if you are in Atlanta, it's a long walk. So you want to offload it headed that way,
Wow.
and maybe 90 cents on the dollar or 80 cents on the dollar. And so it was like looking at Curve, right? I mean, that's kind of what Curve is, or Uniswap are. Like, what is the rate right now for Tether or for USDC or DAI?
So this was the original StableSwap, was this book.
Yeah.
And then you'd see, okay, this is like the creditworthiness of this bank. This is the distance away to actually redeem from the bank. That's fascinating. And
of course, it was totally imperfect because it was, stale information, and, your individual circumstances may vary because you had to think about the physical, you had to physically go to a bank to redeem it. So, the further you are from the bank, less likely you are, just because of, it's like transaction costs, right? On chain. So, how we got from that to today, where everyone will take their Silicon Valley Bank coin or First Republic coin, the same as a Wells Fargo coin, that was a long journey.
We really take that for granted today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it's preordained that stablecoins will walk that path either through a private mechanism or through a public regulatory mechanism. So
what do you mean walk that path? Do you mean like you mean like super
I'm just saying, like,
yeah.
I can see that first assertion, Sam's first assertion. I can see it happening. I can see a way that it could happen, but I can also see many ways that it never coalesces, never really gets that escape.
We're still in the wait and see phase for that.
Mm-hmm. I like to wait and see a lot.
Wait and see PaperImperium. How'd you get your name?
People ask me that a lot. I've long said when someone guesses, I'll let people know.
You took a Latin class, Imperium, and you deal with. I feel like paper has to do with something. I feel like it's something archaeology based from your life in archaeology.
You can just stop your way off.
Oh damn! I'll stop.
It's got nothing to do with archaeology or DeFi. So
you're gonna just keep us guessing.
Yeah.
Speaking of regulation, very recently, a lot of progress has been made in the House on the Financial Services Committee, passing several bills to create a framework. One of them was the Stablecoin Bill, which actually caused a bit of controversy because you had Democrats say, wait, there's no rush. Like, why are we rushing this? It's not ready. But it did have bipartisan support, and they did get it through. It's now being looked at by, I believe, the House Agricultural Committee. What are your thoughts on the bill? Have you looked at the contents of the bill? Do you agree with the process that it was passed?
I think it's definitely better than where we're at. I did disclosure. I did provide commentary when it was at this stages months and months ago. Mm-hmm. I think it's mostly good. Mm-hmm. There's always the possibility of some unintended landmine that was not intended or just not obvious.
Many such cases.
Yes. I thought it was very disappointing to see months and months of work to get people, not like holding hands kumbaya, but months and months of work to get people on the same page to get this thing done, and then see that fall apart so quickly in the matter of a few hours. I don't hold high hopes that it will advance very far at this point, just because it's clear that the administration doesn't want it.
Yeah. That's been obvious since the beginning of the administration. It feels like this isn't a bipartisan issue. It feels like an age issue, honestly, at this rate. It's like the people that are younger get it. The people that are old just like have something against it. I'm not sure. Is that like a right way to frame it? Or is it just like a different type of way to frame it that I'm just not thinking of?
I would hesitate to generalize it based on age. Age might correlate with some other stuff.
Actually, I take it back because there's Tom Emmer and there's other people that are like real champions. So take that back.
Yeah, I mean, this is politics, right? And it's no different from a DAO governance. There's a lot of stuff going on. in the smoke-filled room. I mean, you even see this with ostensibly crypto-friendly legislation, where like you start to see the game of protect incumbents at the expense of, I mean, even crypto does it, right? Where they try to pull up the ladder behind them, which was one of the concerns with stablecoin legislation, is that you don't entrench the incumbents. I actually am not really convinced that the stablecoin that wins, that we all use in 10 years, or is the gold standard in 10 years, I'm not convinced that we've seen it yet. Maybe.
You're not convinced we saw the stable.
I think we need to continue to have the door open to new stable coins, because I don't think we've gotten there yet.
What do you think?
I don't think it's safe, but maybe.
Yeah, because right now Tether has the lead by a wide margin. And one of the questions I wrote, which I'll just speak more generally, is like, what will it take to overtake Tether at that number one spot? Like, what do you think needs to happen? It's like clear regulation. Yeah, go ahead.
I think Tether, for all of its failings, which I won't belabor here, I think they have done something. I think they've really kept their eye on the ball selfishly, in a way that a lot of the DeFi stuff has not. They are, if you talk to someone in Venezuela or Cambodia, and you need to pay some contributor there, or you're buying something from someone and you want to use crypto, they want Tether, right? Because it's got the network effects. They don't care that their latest attestation only had 90 million in cash listed, right? They had a ton of repo and reverse repo stuff, but which is like very close, and little different, but so they're well capitalized. But if you take their attestations at face value, but that kind of thing, like the person who they focused on the places where dollars are not, they have long said, I think a little bit not as genuine as they should have, that they don't operate in the US, they don't have any nexus, which I don't think is quite right. But they have been where the people are, and like we're talking about, they've been where their product solves problems for people, right? You can talk all you want about whether there's unbacked minting going on at exchanges or something like that, or certain questionable actors. At the end of the day, it's except people ask for it, because that's what they can then turn around and spend with another third party. And it's because they went out there into the third world and the second world, whatever you want to call it, and they brought their product to market. They weren't sitting here saying, here's like 8 new ways you can get 30% leverage, 30% yield on 10,000x leverage. They focused on being a medium of exchange, and
increasing their monetary premium. Yep.
Yeah, for all their failings, they did. They weren't just like, how can we buy some T-bills, or they weren't. I mean, that is their business model, is buying T-bills. But to get that free float, they're not the big dog in DeFi, right? I mean, what is that, except on Tron, obviously? But if you look on like Ethereum or most chains, it's not like the respectable people turn their nose up at it. I think that's wrong. I think that's incorrect. I think it's ignoring reality. I mean, they have 3/4 of the stablecoin market for a reason.
Agreed.
How do you think Frax or DAI can get there to even, start taking on a fraction of that?
We need Frax BD in those developing countries.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you're trying to build a currency, network effects are everything. This is a tough question. It's not easy to do. I think there's also, you also need to differentiate, as your stable coin, like, are you running a currency, or are you running not a bank, but like a lender, right? Like, are you running a bank like, I hate to even say bank like entity. What's your analogy? Is the real world analogy a central bank in a small country with a fixed exchange rate, or is the analogy a commercial lender? And those are very different operational models. And you can't necessarily choose to be one or the other. Maybe your choices are constrained, but you certainly can't be both. So profits or reach, it's, I don't know.
Profits or reach. Speaking of Frax and DAI, what are your thoughts on Frax in general, and how do you see Maker and Frax working together in the future, if possible?
I have had a de minimis amount of FRxETH. It's one of the few tokens I actually have a little of.
Yes.
A fellow Fraximalist.
Yeah. So, I think Frax has been improving. I think it's been improving steadily over time. I think Frax, it's really hard not to respect Sam and the rest of the Frax team's ability to. They've got to be the best learners of people in DeFi. Like, the ability to say, maybe the choices I made before, I should correct course, and do it in a controlled manner now. Whether that's looking at a stablecoin blowing up or a bridge or a lending market. I think that's Frax's biggest strength has been, that's just, it doesn't sound like that's that big of a thing. Oh yeah, you see a mistake and you fix it. But especially for all of us with Y chromosomes, that's just really hard. We're allergic to saying I was wrong.
Yeah. and
he doesn't necessarily say he's wrong, but he and the rest of the folks over there, they just, they learn.
They adapt,
that's
they
huge.
evolve, and they survive.
Yeah.
And they just build it in-house.
And they build. They're like, fuck it. Like, this lending markets keep blowing up, we'll build our own. Bridges keep getting hacked, fuck it, we'll build a ferry. Like, that's been the mentality. And now it's like interesting now when you see things blow up, it's just like, oh, sweet, it's okay. We have our ferry, or like, oh, we have our lending market. But I digress. I had one more question, which is more Ken. I don't know if you had any more questions.
Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. Since you have experience on both in the traditional world of politics and also DeFi as well, what would be your advice to DeFi for it to reach the same levels of TradFi and the same levels of institutions we see out in the world right now?
I think better messaging would help. Like, don't call it don't invent like a Degen box. Or
the Degen box. Oh, yeah. How did I forget?
Oh, throwback.
Or call yourself a bank, or the way you communicate matters, right? Including terminology like, don't call your token bond if you don't want people to say, oh, you're selling a security. And then be prepared to, and people worry so much about the security stuff. That's a civil violation. That's a fine. If you're supposed to take remedial action. It's not like wire fraud, you go to jail. So I think first of all, I would just be more cognizant of how people not in crypto would see something. You shouldn't give certain names that have very specific meanings, the other things that you don't want to be associated with that.
Right. Magic internet money.
Yeah. And then quite frankly, probably make some donations to like Coin Center, DeFi Education Fund, Blockchain Association, these places that are, actually out there in the trenches. They're not perfect, but they know how to talk to some of these people. Because it's not for everyone. It can be hard to sit down and have for someone that's like says that you're a liar or a fraud and be like, I'm sorry you feel that way. And be polite. Yeah, but you can't be puerile railing against people on Twitter. That's just not how you get anywhere. You got to work with these people. You got to make them want to work with you. And you got to, if you're not equipped to do that, you should pay for someone else to do it who is in that mindset. They realize, like, this regulator here, if I invent the next best thing, and they approve it, they don't get a dime extra, right? But if I say it's the next best thing and they approve it, and like somebody's grandma loses their life savings, that's going to come back to them. So, their incentives are not to, I mean, you got to think about it from their perspective. Like, they don't have a lot of incentive to help you. You want a regulator that, if you want to talk to them, you got to do people to people, because you can't just be like, I've got the best thing and this thing is awesome, because they don't care.
I got the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
It's called the Degen box. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yep, that we're wrapping up now. And at the end of every show, we like to do a lightning round where we put the crypto away, we put it back on the shelf, and we just want to, bring out who you are and get to know the person behind the paper.
Yes, I like to get to know. I always like to say the person behind the profile pic. But I actually, before I start with my first question, Paper, I want to take a guess at how you got your name. Is the word Imperium from like a citizen, back in ancient Rome, a citizen that kind of takes over a governmental unit, whether it be military or otherwise? And then the paper part is from like paper tiger, which is, appear to be super powerful, but in effect, actually ineffectual and very weak. So putting those two together, it's like a citizenry that handles certain units, but in reality, you have no power.
I like it, but that's not it. The paper's actually quite little.
Damn. I thought I had it.
Literal paper. But all right.
You really thought about that. You were like, all right, let me take my crack at it.
Yeah. I thought you guys went deep into the Congress government style. I was like, I have no interest here, so let me just ponder something.
Yeah.
You get points for effort. You get some points for effort.
All right. So anyways, at the first question of the lightning round is, we'd love to know, what was your virgin crypto experience? When did you first touch the blockchain? But sex doesn't count.
This is so embarrassing. I really had, so I've never told anybody this, but the first crypto experience was like late 2020 or whatever. And a friend of mine who is a total degen was like, oh, you gotta check out like NFTs and OpenSea. And like, I tried to like log in to like buy something to like see what it's like. I was like, oh, this is like just some pictures. Like, how do I spend $20 on this thing's like $20. It's kind of cool. Let me buy it. And like, it was like, oh, connect a wallet. And I was like, I don't want a crypto wallet. And I wrote these, in hindsight, it's stupid emails. I wrote these like emails to customer service at OpenSea, like just demanding. It's like, I don't want your scammy crypto wallet. I just want the NFT. I just want to buy this picture of like a cat, like on a ball or whatever it was. Some, silly animal picture. I was like, I just want to buy it for the $20. I don't want to download this wallet. It's got malware. And I did not understand how any of the NFT needed to go into it was a token that needed to go in the wallet. So there you go. I've never told anyone that before. It's embarrassing.
Wow. Wait. So your first crypto experience was not DeFi related at all, but you wanted to buy a JPEG.
Yeah,
wow.
I wanted to make some stupid picture that because
and now you tinker all the time. You're doing like a bunch of transactions. Yeah,
I'm
Come
not
along,
an
what progress.
I think I own one from like buying one to see how OpenSea worked. But,
wow. Okay. Second question is, what is your favorite off-chain touch grass activity, hobbies, and interests?
I don't get to do it much anymore, but I like fencing. I do a lot of reading, fiction and nonfiction, especially nonfiction.
You're our second fencer on the show.
Oh, really? Who was the other one?
Our friend Christian, NPC Christian.
From Coin Fund.
From Coin Fund. Really smart dude.
So that's why I do a lot of I like hiking, fencing, hiking, reading. Those would be the three main activities. Video games too, with my kids.
Active body, active mind.
Cool. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah. So, what would be some advice to your younger self?
Probably get a different degree. Archaeology was fun, but it's city miles, not highway miles. If you know what I mean.
I like that comparison.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. My question is, if you weren't in archaeology and you weren't in crypto, what would your professional career path be?
I guess it depends on how far I can rewind. I often thought if I
All
went
the
into
way.
I often thought that if I'd gone down a scientific track, I would have liked to have been a botanist of some kind. I like plants and gardening.
Botanist.
A botanist.
Okay, a botany.
Another type of farming.
Good one, Dave.
And then my final question: for who would you recommend to be a guest on Flywheel? Who would you want to see?
Let's see. What do y'all? I mean, y'all have pretty open-ended topics, right?
Yeah.
So and we go deep.
We always find a way to tie back to Frax, but pretty much everything.
I yell at him a lot, but it's to ridicule away his bad habits. But there's a bright young delegate over on Optimism. He's one of the Velodrome folks named Jack Anorak. You should see if he'll come on.
Jack Anorak.
Yeah, he's a fresh face, but I think so.
Jack
Anorak. He'd be someone new, but I think up and coming.
I'm so happy we started asking this question, Keit, because we've been able to get on such great guests. Like you, yes. we got on Omid Malakhan, the author of Re-Architecting Trust, and it's just this daisy chain of recommend. We should really start keeping track. Yeah, we should start keeping track of that. Maybe have an NFT, passing it down like a telephone. All right, I'm just brainstorming. But anyways, PaperImperium, wherever your name came from, it doesn't matter because you are a gift to the space, both helping us traverse the world outside as well as having best practices on the inside. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for your work. And we hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the postgame show. I'm your host, DeFi Dave, here with Capital K. We are right now wrapping up our interview with Mr. PaperImperium, delegate of many DAOs for GF flags, most notably MakerDAO. And yeah, this was the first time we really reached across the aisle to someone from a different stablecoin, as large as MakerDAO. Keit, what are your thoughts on this interview?
I thought it was really interesting because his background is in archaeology, but not in the academia sense, but actually the boots on the ground sense. Mm-hmm. And he was just, he kind of made me realize that no matter what, is that it's people on the other side. No matter what, at the end of the day, it's people. And when it comes to these lawmen and lawwomen, they're all largely painted the same, right? And you just got to know a way to talk to them. But you know that coming from your experience on the Hill.
Yeah, my minor experience as a hill turn back in the day. I was, teleported, no pun intended, teleported back to our interview last week with Omid when he talked about, you can have all the code you want, all the devs and whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's politics. Those decisions of whether to raise or lower a collateral ratio, those decisions whether to pursue a certain roadmap or a different roadmap, those come down to people. Those comes down to the will of the token holders, however the governance works in said system. And so when he was explaining the friction that he went through, that he goes through within the whole process of everything, and also whether it's being on the grants committee council, it's at the end of the day, it comes down to people. In the traditional world or on chain, it's people all the way down. And I feel that part is sometimes overlooked. All too often in DeFi, we kind of romanticize code is law, like the blah, blah, blah. But, we're still dealing with people at the end of the day.
Yeah. And another point that I found I wasn't expecting to hear, but I was pleasantly surprised is he had a lot of dissenting opinions from what,
he's known for that.
I was just, I mean, behind a keyboard, you could type away, right? But being in person and having to put a face to it and say it, I think is a little different. But I was very impressed.
I think one thing that stuck out to me in the interview was his philosophy of wait and see. Like, he was never too quick to jump to conclusions. He's very nuanced in his observations and his final, takeaways from something. For example, with the Spark protocol, he was like, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'll wait and see. With how I mentioned Stablecoin Maximalism, he was like, okay, I cautiously agree with the second part, but let's wait and see on the first part. So he's someone who thinks deeply about things, is very nuanced. And I think that's what makes him a really good delegate. He's, moves very slow. And especially when it comes to policy, and especially comes to crypto and DeFi, where things happen so fast. And we always talk about, wow, things are progressing so fast, man, blah, blah, blah. It's good to have someone that steps on the brakes and it's just like, guys, slow down. Let's just wait and see if it works. I might not agree with this, but I'll wait and see. Like, let's chill. So I think it's healthy to have that kind of voice within DeFi.
100% agreed. I think he's found his calling, at least in crypto terms. I think he's definitely found his calling, and he's in a good spot.
He's one of my favorite Twitters. I highly recommend people follow him at PaperImperium.
Yeah, and another thing, I like his vast knowledge of Maker's intricacies is very evident, right? Like, he explained to us how James Trust 1, like James Allen or whatever the name was like James Trust 1 and James Trust 2, and how both of those kind of came together. And I was really surprised because I didn't realize that Maker doesn't have an off-chain entity, but sort of does. So then it makes me think, well, why
Maker,
can't Frax?
Yeah, so Maker exists as a DAO. It just exists as this
but
thing.
Frax exists as a DAO. But then we have to jump through so many hoops just try to get it to FNA, just to get an FMA, right? Like,
I guess, like, in theory, there could be some trust or foundation created on behalf of Frax to do all that stuff, but we'll see what they have cooking up with Frax V3. I have no idea.
But I was just my whole point of asking that question was because I remember talking to some of the Frax core team, and they were saying how they shy away from RWAs because there are no precautions that they can take in case something happens. Like, there's no off-chain entity to do the suing or to have any countermeasures in case they get rugged. So that's why I was curious to hear how Maker kind of solves it.
It's interesting that he said that MakerDAO, even though they're not technically incorporated in KYC, they can still go and sue. They can still be sued, which is like interesting. So
I don't get that. I'm like, whose name are you gonna put? Are you gonna put MakerDAO?
Where are you gonna send it?
Like a proposal. You're just gonna drop it in the proposal in the forums and be like, your proposal. Maker MIP 46. We're suing you.
So what I was going to also say was, with this institutional knowledge that comes with being in Maker for so long and knowing those tiny little details of how things are tick, and maybe only 20 or like a very small amount of people know, is so essential to the survival of protocols, to the survival of programming languages, to the survival of companies. You saw what happened with Vyper, with the hack. The result of that was actually a change in the guard from the original Vyper devs to a new team. So there was this transfer that happened around the time where the exploit went live. This is what CurveCap told us today on the Blockmates show that we did, that it wasn't caught because of this transfer of power, transfer of the guard, I mean. And it's like that meme. I just had the meme in my head of, like, it's like a whole, like, structure. It's like, MakerDAO, and then, like, in this little corner, it's like this, like, one guy that's, like, keeping it alive, or like open source code, like some, like, voluntary contributor in Nebraska that's been writing since 1993 or some shit like that. So you can't doubt the power of institutional knowledge, and some people, and you're not necessarily monetarily incentivized to keep that power. Like maybe you are over time, but usually it's kept for the love of the game. There's something like deeper, like, it's like a passion.
Yeah, it was a good one. I didn't realize how much I would enjoy it because, I normally kind of shy away from these kind of pods, but I enjoyed this one.
I think you enjoyed the intricacies and the details.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, if you want to catch us on every other week and every other pod where, sometimes Kit's going to be one taking the lead. Sometimes I'm going to be the one taking the lead. Sometimes it's pretty balanced. Make sure you hit that bell button, go subscribe, leave us a comment, let us know what you think, give us a like. Make sure, go. And also, while you're at it, go subscribe to our new website, flywheeldefi.com. Brand spanking new. It's very shiny, very cool.
Hotness.
Also, hotness. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at FlywheelDefi. Join our Telegram at FlywheelDefi. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFiDave22.
You can follow me at 0xcapital_K.
And we'll see you next week.
Peace.
Everything said on this episode is not financial or tax advice. This channel is strictly for educational purposes and is not an investment advice or solicitation to buy or sell any assets or to make any financial decisions. This video is not tax advice whatsoever. Please talk to your accountant and do your own research.